Hello and welcome to another edition of the Pitt Post-Game Show here from the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. We are your hosts, Chris Carter and Noah Hiles. Your Pitt Panthers have defeated the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets 72-64. The first time this team has won back-to-back ACC games here and coming on the road. And I think that part makes it impressive. We'll break down the good and the bad and the ugly from this game and where the Panthers are moving forward as they prepare to take on Miami this Saturday afternoon. But as always, before we do that, I want to remind you, this show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. Go to Mike's Beer Bar today. They have over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are from the local area, and 80 of those local beers are available on tap. Go to Mike's Beer Bar today. We'll talk about more about them later. Noah, you are there, and you are still at McCamish Pavilion in Atlanta, and you saw it right in front of your eyes. Before we get into the good, bad, and the ugly, what was your impression of how Pitt managed through this game?
I didn't see it right in front of my eyes. I want to preface that. I mean, we weren't courtside like Cameron Indoor. We were up pretty high. So after, taking the napkin out of my nose from the nosebleed that I got up here, I was able to, yes, have some analysis, Chris. But in all seriousness, I think my big takeaway here is just it was a gritty win. I think back to last year when I was here, and Pitt won in a similar fashion. Its superstars weren't playing as well. And you know who led the win was Nike Sabande. He came off the bench and he delivered a team high, I believe it was 21 points in the win. And that was the game where they wanted to bench Greg Elliott at halftime. And Nike said, no, you roll with Greg. You let me embrace my role. And that was kind of a game where Pitt was beating the really good teams, but it needed to figure out how to beat the middle of the pack or even the bottom tier teams in the ACC. And I feel like there were some similarities here today. I'm not going to put this current Pitt team on the same level of where last year's Pitt team was when it came to Atlanta, but we saw bench guys really embrace their roles today. Guillermo Diaz-Graham and Ishmael Leggett, and we saw everyone else kind of fall in line after that. And I think that that's a good transition into my good.
Yes.
My good was Guillermo Diaz-Graham.
There you go.
He wasn't the high scorer tonight. He wasn't even the top scorer off the bench tonight. He wasn't the top rebounder. But the game changed because of Guillermo. Pitt was getting absolutely slaughtered in the front court in the beginning of the second half. A 7-0 run to start. I believe 8 of Georgia Tech's first 13 points in the second half came in the paint. When Guillermo checked in at the 14-15 mark, he played until he fouled out in the final minute. And since in those final 14 minutes, Georgia Tech only scored 8 more points in the paint. So the same amount of points that they scored in the games in the half's first 6 minutes or so, they tallied in the game's remaining 14 minutes because of his impact. And defense was the lesser part of his impact, in my opinion. He was great on the offensive end. I mean, Pitt really got its footing with that 9-0 run around the 12-minute mark. 6 of those 9 points belonged to Guillermo. He hit 2 very big 3-pointers.
Yes, he did.
And I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I feel like his outside shots haven't been falling as consistently as they were in November and December. But, I mean, those were no doubters. And that was big. I mean, he contributed a lot of points to that run. And the fact that he did not leave the floor until he fouled out says a lot. There were a couple of Georgia Tech guys who were really gashing Pitt in the front court early on in the second half. And his presence there, and it wasn't just him. It was Zach Austin, who we're going to talk about later in the show. And I think it was a collective effort as well from the backcourt, which we're going to talk about. But Guillermo was a difference maker. Jeff talked about in the postgame how they called a timeout a couple minutes in, and they made some changes. And those changes led to the resurgence and the fight back and ultimately the win. Guillermo was the guy who I think those changes were displayed through the most. And he played a big part in this victory. That's why he's my good. What's your good, Chris?
Well, I want to just add more to your point. First of all, those 2 no doubters. But he also turned around he hit 2 for 2 on 3-pointers tonight. He was 2 of 13 for the rest of this month. So absolutely big shots from Guillermo to knock those down. But I want to talk about the guys who also played a big part in that. And that was the backcourt. The Pitt's guards keyed up a huge second half. Noah, they either scored every field goal or they assisted every field goal.
Yeah.
That was impressive on their part, was their ability to create the offense, and did it without Blake Hinson. At the 12:54 mark, Georgia Tech was on the back end of a 13-4 run to start the, or 13-5 run, excuse me, to start the second half. They had taken the lead from Pitt. Blake Hinson had just gotten his third foul. He was on the bench, and it was like, man, someone's going to have to really step up that's not Blake Hinson to pull this game out. But they didn't back down from that. They didn't cower away from it. They responded to it with their own run of that took control of the game, and that was again keyed by Pitt's guard. It starts with that 9-0 run, and whereas Guillermo had 6 of those points, Jaland Lowe assisted both of those baskets, creating the space for him to score there. And then Guillermo added his own 3 points with a driving layup, got a shooting foul, and then Pitt compounded off of that. They didn't allow it to cool off. They had an 18-5 run right after that, right after Georgia Tech's run, and that response gave them a 7-point lead that kind of established the pace of the rest of the game and allowed them to keep the Yellow Jackets at an arm distance. And it's all the different ways they're doing things. Ishmael Leggett driving in, getting contact, getting shots, making free throws. Jaland Lowe using his explosiveness off the ball. He's creating. He can also hit from deep. Bub Carrington finally getting back to shooting well in this game. And as he told you after the game, he said, like, he felt like he was in a funk. He didn't get to show it as much because of his foul trouble against Duke. But in this game, he certainly did. 6 of 10 from the field, 2 of 5 from deep, led the team with 19 points, led all sides with 19 points. They desperately needed these 3 guys to lift the team while Blake was on the bench, and they did that. And I think that's a great sign for this team moving forward.
Yeah, if I could add one more thing to
Sure.
the note that you made about Blake, where he wasn't really a part of the scoring. I don't know if he scored at all in the second half.
He did not. 9 points on the first.
Yeah. So these are the games where you want others aside from Blake to step up and take control. I mean, it's okay to give Blake the keys to the car when you're in, Cameron Indoor Stadium, or when you're facing Clemson on the road next month. When you're playing your top competition, that's when you have to really, really rely on your superstar. But in a game like this is where you need to look to the bench or to your freshman and say, what are you going to do? What are you going to do? He's not playing well. Are we really going to have to lean on him again, or are you going to step up? And credit to Pitt, man. I mean, those freshman guards, and it's not to say that they haven't stepped up in other games this year and they're incapable of doing that. They are. But they rose to the bell, and that's what Jeff always says, right? He makes those boxing analogies, and he talked about getting back up off the mat, and Bub Carrington did that. Guillermo did that. Guillermo was benched a couple days ago, and he got off the mat.
Yep.
Bub has struggled in his last 3 games. He got off the mat, and Jaland Lowe continues to rise to the challenge. So that's a very big sign for Pitt, where it doesn't just have to be Blake leading the charge, that this team can have other people step up when he's having an off night. And these are the teams you want to do that against, to build that confidence so they're ready to go the next time it is a key situation. But Carter, I was
going to say, what's your bad?
My bad would be Federico.
Yeah.
Fetty was really good against Duke. We talked about that. We wrote about that. And in the first 10 minutes or so, he was pretty good here. He had, I believe, 6 or 7. Is this the first?
He had 7 rebounds.
Here? He had 7 rebounds, and 6 of them came in the first half. He's had all 2 of his points in the first half. But it became pretty clear midway through that he kind of sank back into his old funk. I tweeted it, and I believe I tweeted this in the second half. And it takes a little bit for me to tweet something this critical. But, I mean, this is a guy right now, he can't have the basketball in his hands for more than a couple seconds. Because the longer he holds on to it, the more guaranteed it's going to be a turnover. If he doesn't have an immediate look at either the basket or a quick pass, because I do think he's a decent passer. But if that option's not there, someone needs to run up and take it off of him immediately. Because he's a strip waiting to happen.
Yeah.
He's a travel waiting to happen. There's just not a lot of confidence, and especially when he has to put the basketball on the floor. And you saw that lack of confidence echoed by his coach. I mean, he got pulled at the 14-minute mark, and Guillermo didn't leave the game until he had to. I mean, Fetty, I have the numbers right here. He played 16 minutes in the first half. He finished the game with 22 minutes. So, you're the lawyer, Chris. You have a better brain than me. But, I mean, that's not a lot. Can you do the math
6
on the
minutes
top of
in
your
the
head?
second half.
Yeah, 6 minutes. There you go.
When Guillermo fouled out, I was like, okay, well, Fetty's going to go back in. They put Zach Austin back in.
Yeah.
And that, to me, was like a big sign of the lack of confidence they had in Federico in that moment.
Yeah, no, and that's really all I have to say. And it's bad for Pitt because I think that Pitt is at its best when you can play Fetty at the 5 because he provides your best front court defense. Even with Guillermo playing as well as he did today, Fetty is still has the higher potential on the defensive end in the front court. And that's what Pitt needs from its forwards. It doesn't need scorers. It has that from its wings and its guards. It needs a guy who can protect the rim and box out and rebound. And Fetty did that against Duke for 40 minutes, and he did it for 10 minutes against Georgia Tech, and it just vanished. And when Pitt can't go with him as the 5, Blake as the 4, and run that 3-guard rotation in the second half, it's not at its best. So I don't know what you do here. I don't know if you bench him again. I don't know if you roll with him, and then maybe – because, I mean, Guillermo only played 3 minutes in the first half. So I think at the very least you got to split equal playing time with him on Saturday in Miami. Chris, and I'm sure – your bad has something to do with the front court as well.
Yeah, it is. And it's the rebounding, the offensive rebounding in particular. They allowed Georgia Tech to get 12 offensive rebounds in this game. They got out rebounded there 12-9 offensively. They made up for a little bit overall. They won rebounding totally 33-31. But you were supposed to out rebound this team by a lot more. And that's where I think that things kind of allowed Georgia Tech to kind of take control for a little bit because they kept getting second chances, and in fact they had 12 second chance points in this game. That's not how Pitt has won a lot of their best games this season. They have been able to limit the team's offensive rebounds. They've been able to try to keep them off of the boards there, and in fact that's the I think the most offensive rebounds they've allowed to a Power 5 team that they've beaten this year. So that's a sign of what needs to happen there. Some of it was boxing out, sometimes it was focus, but I think Federico was part of that problem too. Early on, he was in the first half, he was snagging them, pulling them down, kicking them out, and it was good. And then whatever it was, he just wasn't in position. He wasn't getting boxed out. I wonder if part of Fetty's problem is a little bit mental. There was a play where he got backed down by Ndongo, and he just kind of moved him under the basket and then made an easy shot. And it was like after that moment, Fetty stopped doing his basics and doing his fundamentals. And I think that's what Jeff's trying to get into Fetty. Is like, listen, no matter what happens, you have to stick to your game. And I think Fetty's struggling to do that after he makes a mistake.
It was especially against Ndongo. He had no confidence in that matchup. I believe in the second half, Ndongo made each of his 3 first attempts from the field. And then Guillermo comes in, and the guy finishes 2 for 5 from the field. So, I mean, he went from shooting 100% to 40%, and in a very similar sample size. So, yeah, I think he just kind of was like, he has my number. I don't know what it was, but yeah, that was the noticeable matchup from my vantage point. It's like, yeah, this guy is not feeling guarding this kid, and they were going after him. They were going after. That was the matchup they wanted, was Ndongo on Fetty in the second half. So
absolutely,
glad to know I wasn't the only one who saw that.
No, you were right on the money. Great observation. Yeah. What's your ugly for this game as far as something that you were looking at?
Ugly is, and I say this in an endearing way. Zach Austin made the ugly, gritty, tough plays that you need from someone in his role. And Jeff had this quote after the game because I asked him about Zach's impact in the win. He said he made unbelievable plays, 4 assists and 1 turnover. He had a heck of a play where he saved the ball, and we're going to talk more about this play. He had a heck of a play where he saved the ball in the second half, and we ended up getting a shot right at the buzzer. Steals, really good defense. Zach's a guy whose value doesn't necessarily show up in points, although he can score. His value shows up and his ability to impact the game in so many different ways. And I completely, wholeheartedly agree with that analysis from Jeff Capel. That one play that he talks about, it was, for my money, one of the best basketball plays I've seen this team make all season long. It was, ironically enough, it started with an air ball. Jaland Lowe shot a 3 from the left elbow, and it was nowhere near the rim. And if this team was playing the way it was 2 weeks ago, that probably goes out on the baseline, and Georgia Tech inbounds it, and who knows what happens. But instead, Zach Austin, a guy who is probably the only player on this team with the athleticism to even save this basketball, goes and uses his long frame and his vertical leaping abilities, and he catches the ball, and he throws it to Ishmael Leggett at the top of the key, where Leggett was able to, I forget the defender, but he gives a great pump fake, gets an open look at the elbow, and sinks a jumper right before the shot clock goes off.
It was big.
It was team basketball. And moments like that, like I said, that might have resulted in an assist for Austin. I don't know how many dribbles it took. It did.
At the 10-22 mark.
Okay, good. Yes. So it did result in an assist, which it should. And I wish there was something else that could show that it's more than an assist, because he saved a turnover. He saved a lot there. That could have been a play where it's a momentum killer, because Pitt was on a roll at that point. And that air ball could have maybe, took some air out of the tires. But instead, that guy threw a match on a gasoline can, and it allowed for Pitt to continue making explosive plays. So, yeah, that's what I want to say. It's just he gets in there and he makes the ugly plays. He blocks shots. He was great in the beginning. He had 2 really, really nice dunks in the beginning of the game. And he just gets in there and makes a difference in the areas that some guys don't want to make a difference in. And that should be commended. So that's my ugly. What's yours, Carter?
My ugly is where this team has just come from.
Yeah.
In these 2 wins, and I'm not saying that Pitt's back and that Pitt's going to the tournament, nothing like that. But we were together doing this show from the Pete last Tuesday night after the way they lost to Syracuse, and my ugly was then like, it doesn't get any easier. Like they got Duke on the road, they got dogged by Duke here last week, and then they go into Duke, a really great team win. They come on the road to Georgia Tech, a team that's been feisty, against even really good teams this year, and they face adversity. Blake Hinson has to sit for most of the second half. They turn the ball over, they lose offensive rebounding and all those things, and they overcome it and win. I think convincingly. They pulled that one out, and to me, that's a really good sign of where Pitt is that they've been able to rebound from where they were. And assistant coach Milan Brown tweeted this after the game, said, "This is my 28th season of coaching college basketball, and I think this is one of the best true road trips I've ever been a part of. A+ effort from everyone with our focus, togetherness, toughness, and preparation. And it started at the top with Coach Capel." That to me, go ahead, what do you want to say?
Oh, I was going to say, I'm going to call out Milan Brown. He's probably just happy they got to spend a couple days in Atlanta. He probably got some good food. That probably influenced his decision to call it the greatest road trip. But
absolutely. But in all seriousness, I think his point here is this was a team that could have caved in on itself. They have a lot of young players. They have got guys who weren't playing well, and they didn't. They stuck together. They found each other, and it's been different guys. It's not star power of any one person that is lifting this team. And we talked about this after the Duke win. How many times when Duke tried to get a run, and either it was Ish or it was Lowe or it was Hinson or it was different contributors every time. You had 3 different guards who were doing that in the second half for Pitt. Guillermo Diaz-Graham contributing, Zach Austin contributing, and Blake in the first half. This is a team that's finding its balance and finding different ways to win. And when you find more ways to beat your opponents, you're going to be more likely to come out on the positive side of the game instead of having to win just by one style of play. That is a good sign for Pitt. They still have a long road to go. We talked about this in the mailbag show. And talked about it. So they had 13 games and they needed to win at least 10 of them, maybe even as many as 12 if they want to have any chance at the dance. But they knocked the first one down after that. So now they have 12 to go, and now they go on the road to play Miami. and we have a special guest on the show. But in all seriousness, they getting this first step here after the Duke game is a sign of maturity, because I've seen, and we talked about this on our drive back, I've seen Pitt teams beat blue chip programs and say we're back and claim and plant a flag and claim victory, and then just flat out fall apart right afterwards. And they did not do that in this game. That's a good sign that Jeff Capel's got the pulse of this team beaten in the right direction.
And that's not an exclusive Pitt thing. That's a traditional letdown spot. After you win your biggest game of the year. I mean, I was talking with my Uber driver on the way here, and he said he bet Georgia Tech money line tonight simply because he was like, Pitt's going to be flying in high after that Duke game. And I said, that's not a horrible take. I mean, because part of me thought that too. It's how do you not come into this one a little big head? So yeah, props to the Panthers for really hanging on there. So, Carter, any final thoughts?
Absolutely. Just a shout out to this guy who keeps coming over and getting in your shot. But in all seriousness, buddy, I'm glad that you made the trip and you'll be home safe tomorrow. It's going to be interesting. Later on Wednesday, we get to talk to some of the Pitt's new transfer portal recruits for the first time. Get some FaceTime there. So tune in. We have all that coverage for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, post-gazette.com for all our written work, and of course all our podcasting work right here on YouTube or on your favorite podcasting apps. As always, you can find this show there, and we'll have a lot more to cover throughout the rest of the week. Thanks again for tuning in. Like this video if you enjoy it. Subscribe to this channel to get all of the daily content that comes out from all of our different writers. And a reminder, the show is brought to you by Mike's Beer Bar, the best bar in all of Pittsburgh. When you go to Mike's Beer Bar, over 500 different available beers. 300 of those beers are local. 80 of those local beers available on tap. They have over 20 televisions, and they have so many great food options like steak on a stone, seafood on a stone. Either way, they bring it to you on a heated stone. Then you cut off every piece, press it into the stone, and choose how well done you want every piece that you're enjoying. Go to the best bar in Pittsburgh. It's Mike's Beer Bar on the North Shore, and when you get there, tell them Chris sent you. We'll see you again here on the Pitt Post Game Saturday after their game against Miami. Thank you for checking out this content from Post-Gazette Sports. If you watch this video on YouTube, please like the video and subscribe to our channel. For all of the sports coverage the Post-Gazette has to offer, visit post-gazette.com.